Welcome, everyone. We wanted to welcome everybody to our space today. Thank you for joining Foundations in Juvenile Healing to Wellness Coordination. This is Module 1, Starting Points, and my name is Anna Clough. I serve as a co-director of the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and we are going to get started with just some quick notes, and I'll pass it over to Jacob.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacob Matoxin. I serve as the technical specialist for the TYRC. If we could go ahead to the next slide, Anna or Antonio. Thank you. So just some fine print before we get started. So the opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this publication, program, or exhibition are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. And we can go ahead to the next slide, Antonio. We'll get started with some words from our youth ambassador, and I think Laura Smith will help with that part of our conversation today.
Thanks, Jacob. Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody. My name is Laura. I serve as the program coordinator with the Tribal Youth Resource Center. This morning, I'm excited to introduce you all via video to a really amazing young woman, Sydney Matheson, who is part of our group of youth ambassadors who guide the work that we do as a center. And throughout this training, we'll be looking to our youth to open us up and close us in a good way. And so Sydney will be giving our openings, and you'll get to meet another amazing young person, Sam Schimmel, later today for our closing. So she introduces herself in the video, so I won't talk too long now. I'll just pass it over to Sydney to give our opening. And Tony, if you could please pull that up. Thank you.
Why hast ikakwas or hast choho? Hello and good day, or good morning. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you for the opportunity to come before you. My name is Sydney Matheson, and I am 24 years old. I am a Gemini, and I am an enrolled member of the Clough Confederated Tribes out of North Central Washington State. I am here today as a Tribal Youth Resource Center Youth Ambassador, and I serve other roles such as a CNA, an EMT, a student, a background movie star, and also recently I was selected as Miss Washington in the America's Next Miss pageant. Today I wanted to start us off with a little bit of a story and a little bit background on the story. Earlier I introduced myself in my English given name, Sydney Matheson, because a lot of you also may have another name, as I do, your traditional or Indian name. Mine is Squinalachwa Kiana, or Skumka Mayuchin Shiwatum, the first in the Moses Columbia dialect of Salish from my mom's side, and the second from the given language of my name from the Coeur d'Alene tribe from my dad's side. One time I sat on a plane next to the most woke Soyapi chick. We'll call her Summer. Summer sat by me for 5 hours, and instead of 20, we'll call it 200, questioned me. You know, the typical, do you live in a teepee? Do your people have power? Do you have a chief? And then we got down to the, what's your Indian name? And I told her my Indian name, but I also told her that the English translation is Rainbow Girl. And Summer looked at me and passed the vibe check when she said, you know, I see really good things coming from you. Even your name, rainbows. They signify a lot of good change and big things happening in the world right now. And I see a lot of good change coming from all of you guys being here today, and I'm so excited to see what comes from it. Thank you for being here, for having me. Don't forget to drink water, stretch, take breaks as needed, and come back tomorrow.
I know Sydney was able to share that video with us. She had some other things that she needed to be attending to today. As you heard, she's quite involved in her community, and so we're really proud to have her on board as a youth ambassador and thankful for those good words to get us started for today. So we can go to our next slide. So we are joining you on behalf of the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and including our team, which we'll go over here shortly. We are housed at the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. We are a cooperative partner of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And we work in partnership with the National Native Children's Trauma Center, but we also have several other really great partnerships and do broad training and technical assistance for OJJDP, CTAS Purpose Area 8 and Purpose Area 9 tribal grantees and any interested community that is serving Indigenous youth. And we believe that our purpose here in providing training is to enhance opportunities for Indigenous communities to expand their potential and protecting and nurturing their most sacred asset, which is the youth. And we are joining you from many of us who are coming from different communities and are involved in different initiatives in our own communities and in our various places that we work. So we thank all of you for the work that you're doing in your own community, and hopefully as we move forward with this training, you all will glean some things that you can bring into your own work. And I hope that the next 2 days are fruitful, allow you to connect with other coordinators or others who are serving in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, and just get connected to some great resources that are available through our center in TLPI and in NCTC. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to let my colleague Jacob Metoxen introduce himself, and then I'll share a little bit more about some of our team members who are joining us during the training.
Good morning, everyone. Scully Scorgway, Jacob Matoxin, from Oneida, Wisconsin. Currently live in the Green Bay area. I'm training a technical assistant specialist with TYRC, as I indicated earlier, and my role is basically to assist grantees, Purpose Area 8 grantees, with planning and implementing their juvenile healing to wellness courts. I'm excited about our foundational training today. We've got a lot of great colleagues and people with plethora of experience to provide some insight on some best practices and hopefully get the ideas flowing among our participants. So besides training and technical assistance, I'm also an attorney licensed in the state of New Mexico, where I practiced for the last 3 years, and also practiced in Arizona prior to that. I have a family, my wife and 3 kids. I see Amy up from Bad River. I was just there this weekend for the powwow, so it was good to be up. My son was dancing. It was good to see everyone together once again up in Bad River. Grateful to be here today, and grateful for the ask from Anna to be a part of this conversation. I know she's been in the field for quite some time, since the inception of Healing to Wellness Courts. So she's got a wealth of experience as well. I've learned a lot from her. So thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. And I'll hand the mic back to you.
I was going to say, since the inception of juvenile healing, I think I was a baby when wellness courts were first coming into the field. But thank you, Jacob.
I'll preface that by saying grant specifically, 2016.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, so many of you who are joining today, I have had the opportunity to meet, but for those who I have not met, and I know we've had a long break since getting to meet in person at various events, but my name is Anna Clough. I'm Muskogee and Yuchi. I live here in the state of Oklahoma, in central Oklahoma, and as Jacob shared, I have served in my past work as a tribal prosecutor, mainly working on juvenile dependency and delinquency dockets, and then had a lot of opportunities to work for various tribes in the state because I worked for a small tribal firm that had several contracts. So that was a really great experience coming out of law school. And then for several years, I worked in a domestic violence program and was able to work on a civil legal services grant, and had really, I think, my best introduction to try to work in crisis situations, working with tribal families, with those who were victims of domestic violence and survivors of domestic violence, really, and trying to learn more about trauma-informed approach and collaborative teamwork and supporting those individuals. So a little bit about my past work. We will have bios of all of our presenters. We'll share those in the final session materials. But just to let you know who will be joining us in the training in some later sessions, our colleague Erin Thinelk, she is going to be sharing in one of our sessions that is talking about motivating youth behavior change. And then our colleague Christina Pacheco, who is joining us from the BJA Wellness Courts team, and she serves as a special advisor to our team and has served previously as a probation officer and in various roles in the wellness court. So really appreciative to have her in our second session that'll be right after this session. We can go to the next slide. And I want to let my colleagues introduce themselves, Laura and Antonia, who always support us in actually getting these trainings off the ground and helping us with all of the technical support and getting people registered into these events. So Laura, feel free to introduce yourself, and then Antonia, I'd love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Laura Smith. I serve as the program coordinator for the Tribal Youth Resource Center, as I shared earlier, and I'm also a certified practitioner in psychoneuroenergetics, which is a somatic modality for renegotiating trauma in the body. And so throughout our time together to help sort of keep us moving and engage between sessions, I'll be leading us in some very short exercises and activities. So Antonia, I'll pass it to you.
Hello, my name is Antonia Medina. I am Diné from the Navajo Nation. I am the program assistant for the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and it's really great to be here.
Thank you. And everyone can tell them thank you, because we would not be able to do this without them. So thank you very much. We can go to our next group of presenters, and I'm looking forward to you all getting to actually meet more of our team members. So many of you may have had the opportunity in the past to hear from our Tribal Youth Resource Center Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court peer mentors who have recently began to support our team in providing some one-on-one TA support for other new Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court coordinators. So as you all get to hear from them as part of this training event, I hope that you'll touch base with us and you can connect directly with them and learn more about their experience in developing and being a part of a Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court team. So we will have Chanel Grant joining us from the Blackfeet Healing to Wellness Courts. And then we also have Dave MacArthur joining us, and he has served as part of the White Earth Nation Juvenile Healing to Wellness Courts for quite some time. And then we are going to be having our partner, the National Native Children's Trauma Center, sharing in 2 sessions, and they'll be joining on different days. So Veronica will be joining us today, and then Deb will be joining us tomorrow. So I think that's our whole group of presenters. We do have a guest coordinator who will be joining tomorrow. So if you join our coordinators panel, you'll get to learn more about our different coordinators that are going to be sharing about their lived experience serving in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. So we can go to the next slide. All right, and just to give you a quick overview of today and tomorrow, we know that all of you are working in a court system, and so we understand that many of you will probably be with us the majority of the time, but we definitely understand that people have to step away or you may have other things going on. But we hope that you're able to be here and be present, and thank you for giving some of your time to be with us, because we know that everyone stays busy. So today we're going to be doing a general overview of juvenile healing to wellness courts. We are going to have a discussion generally about case management and share some resources that are specific to case management and may help you as you're beginning to design and implement your juvenile healing to wellness court and really establish clarity in your role as a coordinator. Our third session of today, we'll be discussing a trauma-informed approach. We try to integrate this approach into all the training that we do. We work very closely with the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and we felt it's very important to share resources related to trauma-informed care, especially in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. And we have many resources and additional training related to that topic. So today will be a general discussion, and we invite you to review and get connected to some of our other trainings that we've hosted on that topic. And then to end the day, we're going to be talking about developing partnerships, because those are essential to this approach. The Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court by nature is collaborative and should involve many people in the community and many partners that can help contribute to the overall experience that participants have as they come into the court. So we will be talking about how to develop and establish partnerships and hopefully help continue those into the future. And Jacob, I'm going to let you talk about day 2.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please, Tony? Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Judge Patty Heft. I saw she's on here. Thank you for being here, Judge Heft. She's the judge for the Oneida Judiciary here in Wisconsin. So just to continue our schedule here for the next couple of days. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about recovery and sustained behavior change with Aaron Thinout. And then we'll talk about lessons learned in developing a juvenile healing and wellness court. That's going to be with Dave Chenille and also Julio de los Santos from Quapaw Nation in Oklahoma. I think that's going to be a really good discussion, especially considering the diversity in programs that are going to be represented, as well as the diversity and experience from the individuals who are going to give their insight into, what they've seen work, what they've seen, the type of obstacles they've seen, and just strategies for overcoming any setbacks, and really just being a part of a successfully implemented juvenile healing and wellness court. For the third session, we're going to have observations of functioning courts, kind of similar to session number 2, except we're going to get into details about what is exactly happening within juvenile healing and wellness courts that have been successfully implemented over time. And we'll talk a little bit about our enhancement grantees as well, look at certain resources and certain similarities among communities that have contributed to their success. So that should also be an interesting conversation. Then finally, we'll wrap up with the self-care discussion from NNCTC. And I highly recommend that discussion. We've done presentations and been a part of presentations from NNCTC about self-care and traumatic stress in the work environment. So if you work in an environment where, you're dealing with a lot of trauma, individuals, as Anna stated earlier, working in, a domestic violence environment where you're dealing with victims of crime, it's really something you're going to want to be in tune with, to kind of, step back and think about, your own situation and best practices for how to deal with some of the emotions that go into such an intense work environment. So I'd highly recommend our 4th session tomorrow. And I think we can go on to the next slide, Antonia. So right now, thank you all for introducing yourselves in the chat. Appreciate it. If you haven't had an opportunity to, please do, just so we know who's with us today. We're going to do some polls, and this is basically to get more information about you all, as well as to help the conversations evolve over the next couple of days. Obviously, we've got presentations set aside with these PowerPoints, but we're hoping that these conversations and presentations are adapted over time to your all needs and as well as your contributions. So let's start with number 1. What is your level of knowledge of the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court?
And I think Antonia's, yep, she's gonna bring up those polls. So this is poll 1. And all answers are okay. So if you're here and you're just learning about wellness court, feel free to click 1.
Be wary. If you click number 4, we're going to be asking you a lot of questions.
Yes.
We're looking for the experts.
And I
And
think,
Antonia, yeah.
yeah.
Want to show the results, Antonia, of our poll question? Let's see who's all on. So a majority of people have heard of juvenile healing and wellness courts and have experience working with juvenile healing and wellness courts. Unfortunately, number 4, your guys' names aren't visible, so you lucked out this time. But please do, if you have a lot of experience in juvenile healing and wellness courts, contribute, unmute yourself or use the chat. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. I went with 3. But if you marked 4, we invite you to share your experience as part of the training. All right. I think we have our next want to ask our next question. All right. So if you have a juvenile healing to wellness court, we would love to know what stage your court is in. So we have the privilege of working with many ODJDP funded tribal grantees. We know there may be other tribes in the room who are interested, or maybe you've had a juvenile healing to wellness court in the past. So feel free to share. If you don't have a juvenile healing to wellness court, if you're in the planning stage right now, and that includes even if you're a prior year grantee and you're still working on planning, please feel free to share that. If you're operational, definitely let us know, because we consistently get requests from new sites that are interested in visiting currently operational sites. And so we're working on getting a list together. We know several, but it would be nice to have a working list of all the operational courts so that we can provide some regional locations when we get those requests. And then we know that some communities may have other wellness court initiatives in their court system. So if you have an adult wellness court or a veterans court or a family wellness court, but you do not have a juvenile healing and wellness court, let us know. And while we're waiting to get the results back on that poll, wondering for those who are joining today to make sure that you know our wellness enhancement training that will be taking place in September in Albuquerque, and we'll share the link for information about that training. So glad to have you all on today. So it looks like we have some courts that are sharing they do have an operational court. If your court is in operation and you're willing to share that information, please let us know in the chat, because like I just shared, we are working on that list. And if you're in the planning stage, we're so glad that you're here. We're here to support you as you're working on the different aspects of development. And then for those of you who do not have a juvenile healing to wellness court, let us know if you recently applied for funding, or if you're interested in learning about the funding opportunities that are available for juvenile healing to wellness court, and because those funding periods will open towards the end of the year, and usually at the end of the year or the start of the year from ODJDP, so we can keep you informed about those opportunities when they come along. All right, Jacob, do you want to ask our last question?
Sure. And finally, where is your juvenile healing and wellness court if you have one? Where is it housed, or where will it be housed? What's the plans for your healing and wellness court? We've got some options here. At the actual court, family or social services, behavioral health treatment, education, and youth services department, or other. We've seen a variety of different settings where juvenile healing wellness courts are housed. So if you have other, please feel to contribute in the chat. Let us know what your community is doing. And also in the meantime, I'll show my bias once again. I saw that Judge Wallace is on from Oneida Judiciary as well. Thank you for being here today, Judge.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we're really interested in hearing where you are planning or do have your court housed, as we have different communities who are getting their court started. And while we know that there is a judicial tie to the court generally, and we are seeing some juvenile healing to wellness programs being established, and they are not necessarily housed within the court itself. And so we're interested in learning more about the placement of the program and the involvement with the judiciary in your community, because we know that there's some different approaches that are being taken to support the supervision aspect of the juvenile healing to wellness court. So we're interested to learn more about that.
It looks like Floyd asked the question if we could do multiple. Floyd, I think we're only allowed to do one choice at this point. So if you have multiple locations, feel free to provide that information in the chat. Thank you. It looks like the majority of our healing and wellness courts are housed at the court themselves. Not necessarily surprising. However, we do have some other, as well as behavioral health treatment, youth services department, and education. So it's good to see a variety of environments where the healing and wellness courts are located. Hopefully we'll get some insight into, the differences in practices based on environment. I'd be interested to hear about that. And we can go on to the next slide then. We're gonna touch briefly on some discussion, general overview discussion of juvenile healing and wellness courts. So we're going to talk about the history, purpose, the courts today, what's available, and then planning for the future. So I think we've got a timeline here, Antonio. If you want to go to the next slide, give you a little bit of insight. And, so this is a history timeline created by Anna. She'll talk a little bit more. I'll just give you some background information so the first drug court program was opened in 1989 in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Juvenile treatment courts were established in the 90s, as referenced by Anna earlier. And then there are over 400 juvenile drug treatment courts across the United States. So this is an expanding area of interest in terms of resolving some of our cases. And between December 2003 and June of 2013, the juvenile drug treatment courts grew from 268 to 476. And then, just some information regarding why the drug court model pertaining to juveniles was, looked at as an option or even a preferential option for resolving some of the issues our youth are dealing with. So it's estimated that the cost of substance abuse and crime to society are between $820 billion and $3.4 trillion. Nationally, the youth placement rate was 114 per 100,000. The tribal youth placement rate was 236 per 100,000, compared to white youth placement rate of 72 per 100,000. So there's a disparity there. Tribal youth are more than 3 times as likely to be detained or committed in juvenile facilities as their non-Indian peers. In 2010, tribal youth incarceration rate grew from 2.9 times as high as their white peers. In 2019, that ratio grew to 3.3, a 14% increase. And it's shown that male youth make up about 80% of juvenile drug treatment court enrollees, and cannabis was the most frequently used illicit substance. So as you see, some background information, some of the issues our youth are dealing with, disparities between our communities as well, compared to other ones. It really was, the backbone of why in 2015, tribal juvenile healing and wellness courts were introduced as a possible grant. So I'll hand the mic over to Anna, and she can get into her involvement with the programming dating back to that.
So I had the opportunity to start working with the Tribal Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center in 2016, and a couple of years prior in Dave, who's joining us later, can share a little bit about this, but OJJDP had previously had a tribal youth program initiative, and that worked on various prevention and intervention opportunities, and many communities may have had a tribal youth program grant. And in 2014, there was a cohort of 5 communities that were granted an underage drinking initiative funding. And from there, the next year was the first year that there was an introduction of the Tribal Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court funding. But there had previously been some Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court initiatives in other communities. They just weren't federally funded initiatives. So the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court as a general field, I think, is growing. I think that there are a lot of communities who are interested in adopting the Tribal Healing to Wellness Court key components to a framework that can support youth. And we have had the fortunate opportunity to kind of grow alongside the many communities who have received funding and have worked to develop various resources to support treatment in tribal communities, specifically for youth. Because it is a comprehensive approach, our team is made up of various individuals from different backgrounds. And I think one of the unique things that we'll talk about, and hopefully you'll hear, is that many people come into this work from completely different places. So you may have been working in youth services, you may have been working in the court system. We know that we have individuals who were working in law enforcement, working as judges, working as tribal education providers. So people from all different backgrounds, I think, are working in our juvenile healing to wellness courts. And I think one of the most difficult aspects of the development is really engaging with others in the community and coming together to make it a comprehensive system. But the capability to learn and strengthen partnerships and relationships is so helpful for the youth that are coming into the programs. And we see all different sizes of juvenile healing to wellness court teams. We see different partnerships that are brought in. And so I think that's the goal of this training, is to just encourage those of you who are coming into this as a new coordinator, no matter your previous background, knowing that this is an interdisciplinary approach and that many individuals have been able to get their court started just by, the step-by-step of building partnerships and relationships in the community, and then with various people. And, maybe you need to work outside the community with the county or other agencies, but just seeing the growth and the different courts that have been able to get established. So we'll try to share examples of those, and our peer mentors are here to share their stories on how they got their court started and some of the challenges and then the successes that they've seen over time. So in 2021, I just wanted to share quickly, if you have an existing court, OJJP did start a category 2, and it's called Enhancement Funding. And so 2021 was the first year where there was an enhancement grant, and those are 5 years. And so our courts that were funded in previous years were able to apply for enhancement funding, and that allows the community to continue to sustain that work that's moving forward and hopefully continue far into the future with the services that they work to get built up and all those partnerships that they established. So that's a little bit about a brief history on this funding and different things that have been going on in communities with development. We can go to the next slide. So as you all begin your work in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, I think that the main thing that you hear over and over and over again is going to be this interdisciplinary approach. I just shared it earlier, but we're moving toward a collaborative and partnership-based approach. So it's not just one individual that's working with this youth. It really is meant to be a collaborative relationship that you're establishing with various partnering agencies in your community and working on case development that is individualized. And that doesn't mean that every single case is all over the place. I think you're trying to establish some parameters and some different processes that you apply across the board, but really your case management should be individualized to that youth. You should be doing some assessment and some things that give you an indication of what that youth specifically needs. And then your team is working to respond specifically to the different things that occur over time as that youth is involved in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. There is a strong encouragement for you to be involving elders and others in your community who can bring in that cultural piece. That's what makes our Juvenile Healing to Wellness Courts different. They're established in the community. They are culturally grounded. They are building relationships with our different community members who are coming in and being a part of our Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court process. And the hope is that these youth are building long-term relationships in the community and helping to transition them to a path of recovery and reintegration into the tribal community if there's been a separation. The Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court does look to the Wellness Court key components as a framework, and we do have a packet of materials that we're going to be sending to you after this training, and there are links to different resources. Specifically, we would love for you to visit the Tribal Law and Policy Institute's wellnesscourts.org website. You will find all the information you could ever want to know about wellness courts, tons of really helpful resources. If you haven't visited that website yet, I hope that you'll visit sometime after this training or during the training, but there are a lot of resources that are helpful if you're just getting started. We'll also share some resources from our center, and then we'll be following up with additional things that'll help related to each module. And this is an intervention. It can be an early intervention, but hopefully the plan is that your court is working to identify and support youth referral at the earliest possible point. But we know that there's youth who are already involved in the court system. So we'll share a little bit about different referral points where youth can come in. And we know that many courts may have different established criteria for when youth can come in, but we have some different resources that show how youth generally enter into the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, and then the movement of those youth through the program that you all establish as you try to support them in their recovery. All right, we can go to the next slide. All right.
And then Healing to Wellness Courts today. Thank you, Anna, for that information about Juvenile Healing Wellness Courts. Particularly the interdisciplinary individualized service approach. I think that's going to be one of the topics we'll talk about frequently over the next couple of days, especially having the diversity of personalities involved in the multidisciplinary team. You know, you have defense counsel, prosecutors, judges, and then court staff, behavioral health staff. It can be difficult at times to get everyone on the same page. Luckily, you know, our coordinators have a lot of experience, and we'll talk about some approaches they've taken in order to build that cohesiveness among the group. So we're looking forward to those discussions. But in terms of the courts today, so as Anna stated, 2021 was the first cohort of enhancement grantees, both continuing and then new grantees as well. So we're doing a lot of assistance, technical assistance to different communities, and you know, these are, we're going to get into a map here, but just to keep in mind, our grantees are across the country, you know, various environments, different styles of government. So we're seeing a lot of different approaches in terms of successfully, you know, implementing a juvenile healing and wellness court, and then obviously building upon previous efforts and building upon setbacks. You know, the pandemic, a lot of our grantees, you know, had to shut down community and government the last couple of years. So we're getting momentum going with our different communities, and it's exciting to see everyone, you know, looking forward to getting implemented in the planning stage. So across regions, funded and unfunded courts. So we've got some communities who are not grant funded, who have successful juvenile healing and wellness courts as well, based on some of the principles we'll talk about in our future discussions, our future modules. General range of services between ages 14 and 21, Again, that's going to vary from community to community. Some go as young as 12 or 10 years old. But again, you know, when planning or implementing, you might want to look at the OJJDP grant guidelines and also recommendations under the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines. We'll share those with you. Innovative and collaborative partnerships. That's another, I think one of the things, so myself, I have a prosecutorial background, and similar to Anna, so we like to have discussions about different ways our communities can get creative in addressing substance abuse among youth. And that's really innovative partnerships, you know, looking outside the box, beyond what's available, you know, day-to-day operations, maybe reaching out to jurisdictions beyond the reservation or beyond the tribe, and really trying to solidify those partnerships in order to, you know, create that collaboration that can really enhance, you know, our outside jurisdictions' view on our operations within the court, and hopefully, you know, from an Indian law perspective, you know, start to make change between those relationships. And then transformative and restorative processes. Anna touched on those earlier: circles, elder panels, youth peer-led support, and integration of services to support whole wellness. These are the more cultural aspects that make juvenile healing and wellness courts and tribes unique. And, you know, we talk about the quote unquote juvenile healing and wellness court being introduced in the 90s and then having grants introduced in 2015, 2016. But in reality, a lot of the practices have been going on for, you know, for time immemorial. And, you know, we've got our guest today, Ethelene Ironcloud. She's very well versed in these practices that have been happening within communities even before the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court grant was shared. So we've got a lot of different perspectives provided during our discussions today and tomorrow. And I think we'll look at the map now that Anna created. Thank you, Anna, for creating the map. This is just to give you an idea of where our communities are located with our Juvenile Healing and Wellness courts. There's 30+ funded courts across the country, and that includes the enhancement grantee cohort from fiscal year 21. The purples are the enhancement cohort, if you look. Some on the West Coast, the Plains, Midwest, and then the Southern Plains as well. The red is going to be FY20, fiscal year 20. Green is going to be 2019. 18 is yellow. 17 is going to be brown, and gray is going to be 16. So as you can see, we've got not only courts across the country, we've got courts who have different levels of experience and different levels of planning and implementation at different stages. So we're looking forward to gathering more information from you all, our participants today, in hopes to continue our evolving conversation about best practices and really getting creative about what's best for our youth who are involved in our programming. And Anna, I don't know if you have any additional comments.
No, I just wanted to share. I like the maps, just gives me a better representation of where people are at and where this work is occurring. And I think one of the things that we talked about is that while the field is growing, you know, when you think 30+ and then, you know, 500+ tribes, that there's still many opportunities to learn and grow and adapt the framework to really have communities implement this in the best way possible for what works for their youth. I think one of the things that we stress as we share these resources or share information is that, you know, the framework and the practices that we share, you know, the recommendations, but we know that communities really need to adopt a framework that works for them, that works for the region that you're in, for the services that are available, and for what's available to you specifically as a team. And so I think that's what's most important for me to share, is just that, you know, we hope that there's never anything shared that's discouraging, but that you would see there's a lot of opportunity to innovate with what's existing in the community. I think we're going to share that tomorrow. And today, when we're talking about partnerships, it's really, you know, what are the strengths in our own community? What do we have that is available? And yes, we know that that communities can be under-resourced, but that there are opportunities to collaborate, even when we, maybe lacking in one service or another. So what can we do in lieu of this particular recommendation or this practice that we see in other treatment court settings? I know that's a really big challenge, I think, for a lot of the court development. So if you see someone that's close to you, we'll share. Hopefully we can share a contact sheet. We're trying to get that updated as well. If you're interested in meeting regionally with coordinators that are in your area. So we'll be hopefully sharing that by the enhancement training. So we can go to the next slide. So we're starting a module 1, like where are we moving to the future? But I think we wanted to just share the question that we asked earlier about where's your court going to be housed. So one of the major differences that I think I see between the adult healing to wellness court and the juvenile healing to wellness court is the fact that we're trying to develop something that is appropriate for youth. And so many times that does transition the types of services and activities that are involved in the juvenile healing to wellness court. I think that we're also seeing across the field of juvenile justice that the more limited contact youth can have with the judicial system, the better. And so looking for ways to quickly transition youth out of the judicial system and into appropriate services that can support their needs as you're working with them. And we know that there is an element of community accountability and safety, and that goes to individual safety and collective safety. But just looking at how are we housing our courts, where are we housing our juvenile healing to wellness court services? I think that we're strengthening a lot of the behavioral health partnerships in juvenile healing to wellness court because we see this increase in mental health crises amongst youth. I think there's a lot of recent news, especially after the pandemic, about the needs of our young people. And so I think that the juvenile healing to wellness court as an approach is going to continue to grow. I hope that communities will continue to see the benefit of quickly connecting and referring youth to services that can assist with those issues that they're having. And I think that there's continued growth in treatment and cultural interventions. And we're really happy to have many members of our team and others who we've been able to partner with share about the different treatment approaches that they're bringing into their juvenile healing to wellness courts. And so I hope that this training, if you were with us back in 2020, we did a training similar to this. It was a short 6-part series and it was over several months. Really, this is the first time we're doing it in this really condensed format, but I hope that this is a springboard to continue the connections of everyone that's joined in this room today, because you're either interested or you're already doing the work or you're planning. And so I hope that these relationships that are started over the course of the next 2 days, that we continue those. And I hope if you're able to be with us at the enhancement training, that you'll introduce yourselves to our team, because we want to make sure that we're staying connected with each other, both virtually and in person, and hopefully strengthening each other's work by staying connected to one another. So that's what I'll share about the future. Jacob, I don't know if you have thoughts just about the approach and where you see some things going.
Yeah, I think for individuals with a legal background, juvenile healing and wellness courts are an interesting niche in tribal justice systems with a lot of potential, especially with recent decisions that kind of created even more of a jurisdictional complexity between tribes, states, and the federal government. If you look at the approach juvenile healing and wellness courts have, in terms of building a team, bringing all these different departments together, I think there should be more discussions about how to maintain and build those relationships with the state. And so I see, hopefully juvenile healing and wellness courts being an opportunity to assert sovereignty for tribes, as well as respect the ability of outside jurisdictions to also you know, have a say in the future of youth who may be justice involved in terms of, you know, maybe these collaborations leading to additional youth being introduced to healing and wellness courts within the reservation, despite, you know, charges or what have you happening outside of the reservation. So that's where I see the future of juvenile healing and wellness courts. And I'm hoping to get more, you know, prosecutors, the attorneys involved as time goes along, and see that happen, because I think the dialogues are really going to put in perspective the reality of some of the issues our youth are facing, especially the ones who are dependent on substances. So that's really, you know, why I'm interested in the field, and hoping to spur some conversation among the variety of people we have here today from the different parts of the country within your respective communities. So thank you all again for being here. I think we're going to jump into the group discussion now.
So we are happy to have a pretty big group here today. So we have a few questions, and you can either chat a response in, or feel free, if you would like to share verbally, if you could raise your hand just so we don't all speak over each other. Feel free to raise your hands and join in the conversation. So we just have some things we wanted to invite the group to share about. And since we are at a starting point, you know, just sharing, if you're just starting a juvenile healing to wellness court, or you're planning, specifically, what were the issues that you were seeing in the community that really made you all as a community say we need to start a juvenile healing to wellness court? So if you're willing to share that, if there was a point where you're seeing the different things that are going on with the youth in your community, specific issues, but what spurred your investment of time and effort into developing a juvenile healing to wellness court. And you can chat that in, you can raise your hand, and we'll ask you to speak.
And if you have camera capabilities, feel free to turn your video on as well, if you're feeling bold today.
September 2nd at 1 o'clock.
Mira Lisa Huntington. Hello, Miss Huntington. Did you have something you want to discuss about
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was on. I am so sorry.
That's
I will
all right.
mute myself right now.
Beautiful earrings you have in your photograph.
Thank you.
Looks like we got a response from Richard Blake. What we saw as the state court system was keeping our youth in the system longer than any other group. We felt that we were able to provide better options for our youth. That goes in line. Thank you, Mr. Blake, for that contribution with, you know, some of the discussion points for why healing and wellness courts were created in the first place was that disparity between groups and, you know, tribes starting to, you know, want to build that trust to say, hey, you know, we're seeing these differences in numbers. Obviously the approaches aren't working. Let's try something different. I got one more. Judge Blake, apologies. And along those lines, I think, you know, where I was working before as a prosecutor, you know, we had over 2,000 cases filed a year. And, you know, I'm not lying when I say 95% of them involve substances. So unfortunately, you know, you see the recidivism rates go up, you know, when substances are involved, and you're seeing intergenerational defendants start in the juvenile justice system and then quote unquote graduate up to the adult system. So the way I look at juvenile healing and wellness courts is really an opportunity to reduce recidivism and kind of address the problem before it gets out of hand or before individuals become more justice involved as they get older. And then Patty, many first-time offenders with drug or alcohol-related issues that need a more comprehensive approach to services rather than court system involvement. Thank you for sharing, Patty. And yeah, a lot of, the courts we're seeing really are focused on those individuals who are first-time offenders, don't have the, are in line with the grant requirements of not having any felony level offenses. And really, the multidisciplinary team approach is in effect to address that substance abuse and really create that collaboration among your communities. Giselle says recurring juvenile cases. Most cases were only addressing the concerns at surface level. There was no exit plan and staff to ensure they are working with student post-court or on prevention services. And I think that's very true. Giselle, thank you for sharing, especially for communities who may not have the resources in terms of staff to spend a lot of time, on these cases, or, like myself, I was handling juvenile and adult cases. If I had a juvenile healing to wellness court, I think it would make my life a lot easier to refer some cases to healing to wellness court instead of always having to take, juveniles to trial court for substance abuse issues. And then also, I think having that direct line to behavioral health would address a lot more problems and a lot of the recidivism we're seeing. So thank you, Ms. Montoya.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we'll go into more detail further into our training, but is the discussion around, because we just had that brief discussion on level of offense, type of offense. And really, when you think about the juvenile healing to wellness court as an intervention or as an early intervention, I think that we're seeing more of the juvenile treatment courts and the juvenile healing to wellness courts working to address youth who, maybe they're not at this very high level of risk, but we know that there's things going on in their life that's inhibiting them, that they are engaging in substance use. And so we're seeing the capability to address youth who have a moderate risk level and really adapting the program so that it's an appropriate time that they're involved in the juvenile healing to wellness court, and then trying to keep them connected to those other services. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that you can develop the framework and really make it so that it's supporting the youth in the way that it needs to in your local community. Looks like we have some more comments. Jacob, if you want to read those.
Sure. So looks like we've got something from Jen or Jenny, apologies. Our tribe saw the need because of the increase in substance use with both our youth and adults, especially in our smaller, more remote communities. Statistics have shown that this has been a huge contributor to criminal offenses. Our tribe saw the need to focus on the healing instead of the crime and to offer a holistic approach in addressing the contributing factors of substance use to treat at the root and reduce recidivism. Yeah, I mean, like I stated earlier, a lot of the criminal offenses, the violent offenses stem from substance abuse based on, some of the cases I was working on as a prosecutor. And, when you see individuals have those dependencies and then start to get the assistance they need, there is a behavior change. So thank you for sharing that, especially I think Ms. Buckmeyer is up in Alaska. And so another consideration we see a lot is PL 280, the differences between the states who have jurisdiction within reservations and then the non-PL 280 states. Those relationships between the outside jurisdictions might be a little bit more critical, especially when your juveniles are going into county and state systems. Building, that outreach and building that trust to have some of your juveniles go through your court system is critical, especially at a young age. And speaking of PL 280, I don't want to call anyone out, but I know we've got Judge Heft and Judge Paulus here in Wisconsin. So if either of you judges want to, talk a little bit about maybe what Oneida is doing with the state or with Brown County or the city of Green Bay, that would be helpful.
Hi, hi, Jacob. Can you hear me? Let's see.
Yes, Judge.
At Oneida, we're starting an adult healing to wellness court, and hopefully it'll open up and we'll start later this fall. But we also have a new citations law that the nation adopted called Public Peace, and in it lists various different kinds of violations that police officers are now citing children for. So I had my first case a couple weeks ago with a child, a 15-year-old, and after I didn't make a decision at the case, but after thinking about it, I thought, you know, I'm dealing with a child, and I don't know if we've thought about, or the creators of that law thought about, how that would apply to children. And so children should be treated like children, and the goals of punishment in that citation law should not be applied to children. We should be doing something different. And so that's why I tapped into your section. So we don't have criminal jurisdiction in Oneida. The Menominee Nation does, but Oneida does not. But our citations law that was created by the tribe gives us sort of inches us forward toward criminal violations that could be cited in Oneida someday. But for now, that's how we're handling that, the lack of criminal jurisdictions. I don't know if that addresses what you're looking for, but that's kind of generally where we're at.
Yes, Judge. Thank you for your contribution and for sharing. I think that's another, dynamic to think about too, is the legislative, perspective. The Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court can sometimes involve your tribal council. And if tribal council can see the successes of your Healing and Wellness Court, there may be a reevaluation of your civil or criminal code. So it's good to hear Oneida is taking a creative approach on the civil side in order to at least get juveniles in the court system to address some of the behavior. And then hopefully, this will create discussions about different ways to approach these offenses, whether that be, community service or ways to get the youth involved more so, within Oneida or within the respective tribes.
So to bring us back into what your specific needs are as part of joining this training. So I know all of you came here today. I hope that something drew you to want to be here, if that's being a new coordinator, if that's being in the planning phase of your grant, if that's just a general interest in wellness court. I know we had a funny discussion when we were planning that poll, but it was, what is a wellness, what's a wellness court? And if you're in the room and that's where you're at, we're glad that you're here. So if you're planning on being with us over the next couple of days, what is something that you're interested in learning more about? So if you've had a brief introduction to wellness court, or if you are new to the grant world or new to the OJJDP grant funded world, what is something in what you've been looking at so far you're interested in learning? And
with wellness court and how.
Sorry, I don't think Deborah knows she's up. Hi, Deborah. I think you're
I'm sorry.
muted. So one thing that you're interested in learning, feel free to chat. Feel free to raise your hand. And I see Craig Goodface. And please share your role with us. If you're a member of the judiciary, we want to refer to you as a judge or in your role. So Craig, do you want to share?
Hi, my name's Craig Goodface. I just got hired on recently as the Juvenile Wellness Court Coordinator here at Quinault Indian Nation. So we are in our very first stages. Like, I've been here probably 3 weeks. So we are just now starting to get up. And so my interest in joining this is to try and learn, to get it up and running. And the reason why we started it is because we started seeing a lot of juveniles going through the court system for alcohol, for truancy, and other aspects. And so I was a chemical dependency counselor, and I saw a lot of them coming through, but they never had anything. There was no intervention before them coming to the chemical dependency department. And so I'm here to try and learn from everybody and try and get as much information as possible.
Thank you for sharing, Craig. Jacob, if you see any other hands, feel free to.
I think Judge Blake stated that involving tribal council can also assist in sustainability if and when funding might end, seeing the importance of what the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court provides. Thank you, Judge Blake. And Giselle says, post-pandemic initiatives, most tribes are reopening from the closure of the pandemic. I would like to hear more on how programs are seeing successes in community engagement. Yeah, that's going to be a big thing. I mean, even, I talked about going to the powwow up north in Bad River this weekend. That was the first powwow in a couple of years. So seeing some of these opportunities open back up within our communities are good things. And I think we'll hear a lot from our coordinators in terms of making those connections and hoping to get our youth more involved in some of our happenings within the community. It looks like Michael came in, unmuted himself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what role motivational interviewing is play or what has that been something that's been utilized, and how effective is it, and the training involved in that?
So tomorrow morning, we're going to have a session talking about how do we motivate behavior change. And I think, for us in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, we see some adaptation of various models that are used generally in treatment court, which is that for the adult side, that sanctions and incentives model. But then on the juvenile court side, I think that Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, to me, there should be a stronger emphasis on building that relationship and supporting youth. And I think that motivational interviewing is definitely a part of that, especially when you're trying to learn more about the youth, support their own individual goal setting, understanding what's going on, in the home, at school, and elsewhere. And so tomorrow, Erin will be joining us, and she'll be sharing a little bit about her work and some of the different approaches, but definitely I think that we do share motivational interviewing and have some resources for that. So we'll share those tomorrow. And then if we don't cover something in this, it's only 2 days. I think we could spend a long time together and maybe not cover everything. And so if there's anything that you were hoping to talk about and we don't cover that in this 2-day session, just know that we're here and we have continued training opportunities. And so if you have questions or things that we don't cover over the course of the training, we will have an evaluation at the end, and you can put that in there and we can continue to do follow-up if there's things that you would like more support or additional resources, and we can definitely do that.
Thank
you. Oh, I see Erin. Thank you, Erin. She said that is a great skill to incorporate. I think we had one more comment that was shared. Interested in hearing about the screening processes or factors for admission into the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. And in session 2, just after this one, we're going to talk a little bit about entry criteria. Really, you all get to determine what are those specific criteria for who is going to enter into the court. There are some general recommendations just related to need. So the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court is a specific intervention for youth who are involved in the use of illicit substances, drugs, or alcohol. Specifically is what the OJJDP grant is funding. However, we know that there's other issues that can arise that affect either admission to the court, or maybe they fall just outside of your general criteria, but you do want to bring them into your Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. So we'll have a brief discussion about what are the parameters that you all would like to set for entry into the court. And then we do have various coordinators who've shared their initial screening processes. And so sometimes we see if the youth are arrested by a local law enforcement agency, they may have a juvenile probation staff that are doing some initial assessment. And some of those we've seen that are able to share those assessments with the coordinator of the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. Some coordinators and teams are able to establish their own intake and assessment processes. And so we'll share some information about different tools that communities are using for that intake process. And then I can also individually follow up with you afterward if you have more questions about that. All right. So those were a few questions. I know we're right at coming up on 11:15. So we can move forward, and I just want to invite you all to continue to use the chat, and we'll keep revisiting it during the training. And if there's questions or things that you want us to follow up on, please let us know, because we'll do that following the training. So at the end of the day, if there were pending questions or things like that, we'll try to get back to you if there's individual questions. And feel free to message us directly if there's something that you don't want to ask in front of the whole group. We understand that as well. So feel free to message myself or Jacob, and we can follow up with you following the training. So if you are an OJJDP tribal grantee, or if you're interested in learning more about getting started on a juvenile healing to wellness court, one of the things that we had the opportunity to develop a couple of years ago and have continued to amend just based on things that we're learning about juvenile healing to wellness courts is a free planning assessment tool. You can use this tool individually. So if you're a new coordinator and you want to just sit down and use this assessment tool, for us as a TA specialist, what we do is can sit with you and we've been doing this online during the pandemic, but walk through the assessment and try to answer each question with the best knowledge that you have at that point in time. And you can go back to the assessment, do follow-up questions, but really what it does is follows the tribal 10 key components for healing to wellness courts. It also asks questions that are specific to juvenile development, and then it asks questions specific to your community about planning and resources that are locally available. And what that does after you complete the assessment, it helps kind of give you a better picture of where you're at in light of a general juvenile healing to wellness court framework, and what might be existing in the community that's going to contribute and be brought in immediately as part of wellness court development. And then are there areas where there may be services that are just not available locally, and maybe there's some other things that are in place that could be utilized. And I share that saying, for example, worked with a community last year, and they had a very limited access to behavioral health staff at their local clinic, and they had 2 behavioral health team members that had actually left, and those team members really had limited services for youth specifically. And so they were coming up against some real issues in being able to do their intake and initial assessment for the youth that were coming into the juvenile healing to wellness court. And so as an alternate option, they were able to talk with the school. They had a school-based counselor that was actually able to develop a limited partnership with their juvenile healing to wellness court and do some assessment that at least gave their wellness court team a better picture of the needs that were occurring for that youth, for the youth that were going to be coming into the court. So things like that, we know that there's different things that are involved in wellness court, and maybe you don't have that specific service, or that's not really an activity that you have going on, or maybe there's a limit in how many youth can participate in a certain activity. And so just different things that occur as you're starting to say, we'd like to have this as an element in our court, but we don't really have that right now. It's something we want to build toward the future. So this assessment tool, I think, is really helpful. There's a link to it. We also have it in paper format, and I can actually show you. I wanted to show you both. Antonia, if you can let me screen share, I wanted to show both of those tools. Okay, so this is the online version of the tool, and you can actually sit with your team and walk through all of these questions. And I think for me, that's really helpful to sit with a group that's actually going to be planning the court and to walk through all of these questions, because I think that can start to help you all align the roles and responsibilities within the court. You know, who's on first, who's doing what, who's going to be involved in our intake and assessment, who's actually going to be receiving this youth once I send a referral for some certain service that I'm hoping that they'll be able to have access to. So I think it's really important to sit down as a group and have these conversations, you know, coming to a consensus on what is our intake criteria, what is our service criteria that we're going to be establishing, because it is really important to have clear policies and procedures, and to also provide clarity for those youth and those families that are coming into the court. So for you all to get on the same page, to start to firm up those policies and procedures, and to have conversations about the options and different things that are going to be available for the youth. And when you see these different services that are available, this is based on a very broad scan of different treatment options and things that we've seen in other communities. So it's not expected that you're able to click all of these. It's just, you know, the ones that you know that you have access to, mark them, because that can help you later when you're trying to develop some resource materials for your program participants, or you're putting together your policies and procedures. So this doesn't take long. You could actually probably fill it out in, you know, less than an hour if you were by yourself. If you're with a group, it might take you a couple of hours to walk through it. But that's the electronic version of it. If you are like me and you like paper, we do have this available in a paper format. And so you can download it, you can sit with your group, you could all fill it out and then compare the answers to each other. You could fill it out individually and meet with your training and technical assistant specialist and walk through those questions. But it's really meant for you as a tool, and it's a self-assessment. So we don't take that information really beyond us as a TA. And that's for us to really sit down and be able to assess, okay, you had questions about this specific area of the court. This might be an area where you're really strong and you have a lot of services, and we would make recommendations about, you know, this is what we've seen other courts doing and how they've tied into this particular service or community activity, and how you could bring that into your own court. And it does at the end have a very specific section that's really more for OJJDP grantees. But since we opened this training up to anyone that was interested, when you get to the end of this, you might see some things that are specific to some of the planning processes that we have in place for OJJDP tribal grantees. I think they're still good questions, but you'll see that at the end of this. So if you're a tribal grantee, this follows along with the strategic planning packet and template that you got at the start. And then in our training materials, I think, Antonia, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I want to make sure that we cover what we wanted to. Okay. All right, so those are some planning assessment tools. Both of those will be available in the, we'll send you a link if you want to do the online version. If you're interested, or if you're just now starting to plan, that's a great place to start. If you would like the paper copy and you want to meet with the training and technical assistant specialist, we are all here. That planning group that you saw at the start, any one of us is willing to meet with you and walk through that. If you're meeting as a team and you're wanting to discuss some of the areas in that assessment, we will meet with you anytime. You can schedule a time to meet with us, and we'll work through that. If there's resources that we can connect you with to help you with those different development areas, that's why we're here. One of the things I wanted to mention as you get started, and if you're in pre-planning or early implementation, is community assessment. And one of our TYRC peer mentors is going to share on the panel tomorrow just about some things that they were able to do locally that helped in the development of their juvenile healing to wellness court, and some of the things that they're doing in their court. And so one of those things that they were able to do was a community readiness assessment. And I don't know how many of you have ever participated in that process, but there is a free tool if you're interested in doing a community readiness assessment. And we have additional resources that can help you if you're needing support doing that. And then our team members, and I'm going to give Erin a shout out, can help if you're interested in doing like an up-to-date survey with your youth or community on different aspects, the issues that are going on in the community related to substance use. And so recently, Erin was able to help a community do an up-to-date scan, developed a survey for them that they were going to send out to the community to get some better information related on perceptions and what's actually occurring in the community related to substance use. And then to get some knowledge about, does the community know what's available here? Do they know about the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court? This is a court that had just newly been established, and so trying to do some community outreach. So if you would like support in that area, we are able to do that, and so I just wanted to share that with you. And we also have a couple of team members who can assist you in conducting a gathering of Native Americans. And so some of you may have been involved in a process like that in the past, and we've actually during the pandemic, I believe, had one of our team members that was able to do that specifically with youth. And so a lot of great opportunities to help you all come together there locally with your planning group, and then also in the broader community, just to garner better information about, what's happening. We're getting this thing started. We want to know what the community knows and thinks about substance use and what's really going on, and how we can best as service providers and others connect and make sure that people know what we're trying to accomplish in developing the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. So that was quite a bit of information. Jacob, I don't know if you have additional comments you wanted to share about that.
No, ma'am. I think we can move on to the next slide.
So before we close out this first session, which is really meant to be an overview of what we're covering over the next couple of days, I know we asked a very similar question earlier, but have there been previous efforts in your community to address substance use among youth? And another question about trauma-informed approach. So feel free to share in the chat. You can also raise your hand if you want to share about any other efforts you all have going on in your communities to address substance use.
All right, if there aren't any takers, we'll do a preface for our next session here coming up, I think in 5 minutes, 11:30, Anna?
I think we start at 11:45. So we have
11:45.
short breaks. Yeah, we tried to incorporate breaks throughout the training, and then we will break for lunch as well. So just to let you all know, and if you need to step away from your computer or get up and stretch and do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, we are recording all the sessions, so hopefully you'll be able to watch session later if you miss anything. But yeah, feel free to share in the chat. Feel free to speak up. We want to hear from people, not just be us talking this whole 2 days. You might get really bored of listening to us over 2 days. So love to hear from any of you about various things going on in the community besides Wellness Court.
Even jokes about attorneys, we'll take some of those. Yeah. All right, I think you can go ahead to the next slide then. We'll show our upcoming schedule as well as our session starting in about less than 20 minutes, module 2, principles and case management. So this will give you a general overview of our discussion points, over the next couple of days, and then specifically for our next one. So we're going to have Chris Pacheco as our guest to discuss, as Anna mentioned earlier, some of the intake assessment processes that go into managing cases in your juvenile healing and wellness court or your healing and wellness court. So we're going to talk about collaborating, monitoring tools of participant services and progress, gathering and sharing information for and within the wellness court team, court coordinators, the roles of court coordinators during that process of managing cases among your participants, and then also discuss the importance of the role and consider several models of coordination case management, what those dynamics look like amongst the team, who has the responsibility, and then the different ways that we're seeing courts handle communication, really, bringing everyone together, having staffings, and really just trying to get the best outcomes for our participants. So if you have some availability in 15 minutes, we'll talk with Chris until 1 p.m. Central Time, and then we'll move on to Module 3 and then Module 4. Module 3 is going to be trauma-informed approach to support juvenile healing and wellness court participants. I think that's going to be with Ms. Valeto DeCrane, right, Anna? She's really great, so I highly recommend Module 3. And then Module 4 is developing and solidifying partnerships to support juvenile healing and wellness court operations. That's going to be with our guest coordinators and peer mentors. And I think we got another, we've got from Ms. Buckmeyer. Our tribe has seen a need, especially for our youth, to have more culturally responsive camps. This last weekend, they had a fish camp where youth got to fish, learn to clean their fish, and make nets. Sound like a great turnout, and our youth have expressed wanting more of that. It's good to hear the different efforts your community is making, Ms. Buckmeyer. And I think we're going to have, speaking of Alaska, I think we're going to have our youth ambassador close this out today, right?
At the end of the day. Yep.
At the end of the day? Okay.
Yep. So just so you all know, you can leave your Zoom window open because it's the same link for the whole meeting. So you can go on mute if you leave it, you can leave your camera on, I guess, or you can turn it off. So we'll be back. We'll resume in 15 minutes with Chris and principles in case management. So we will see you in 15 minutes.